before I start this review, I kind of want to establish how the reviews are going to work on this channel now. When I first started these reviews, they began as sort of jokey reviews where I would just summarize an album in just one sentence and just walk off screen. That was kind of the joke of it. However, I feel now I'm kind of moving towards a review series where I'm actually fleshing out my opinions more, and I kind of want to move towards that. So from this review onwards, things are going to be a lot more fleshed out. That's how it's going to work. So with all that said, today I'm going to be talking about an album that came out earlier this year, back in February. However, it kind of flew over my radar a little bit. I only found out about it recently thanks to a friend that suggested it to me. This is the Frights album, You Are Going to Hate This. The Frights are an alternative indie rock band from San Diego, coming out with really strong surf rock with a whisper of punk. I checked out a lot of the older songs. They're very consistent, they're catchy, Now first off, right off the bat, the title of this thing, You Are Going to Hate This, that is a very daring title to give your album. Right at the beginning of this album we have All I Need. This is a very punchy track that captured my attention as soon as I began listening to it. And I felt good. It felt good that this album started off very strongly. There's this nice instrumental guitar solo where the guitar is just sliding and going berserk, just plucking strings and such. It brings a crazy, eccentric flavor to this album, which I was really fond of. And that was carried straight onto the second song on this album, Kids. There's some electronic little manipulations with this track. Sometimes the instrumental's kind of chopped up a little bit. You can notice in the background there's some strange noises just kind of sliding on through. It made the tracks very interesting to listen to. And Kids establishes a good focus for this album, which seems to be a lot about the idea of growing up. In fact, there's a track on this album literally called Growing Up. It's about the teenage youth, and speak of the devil, Kids is about that. Lead singer's just wailing at the top of his lungs, I hate my parents, and then later on, I miss my parents. And again, yeah, it's definitely how a lot of kids talk about their parents. There are also two songs on this album that were originally released in 2014, but have been remade for this album, and those are Puppy Knuckles and Tungs. And they sounded quite different when they were released back in 2014. For example, the version of Puppy Knuckles on this album features this very buzzing bass, which I really enjoyed the addition of, along with the fact that for the chorus on this version of Puppy Knuckles, the chorus slows down and then picks back up in this tempo when it goes back to the verses. It reminded me a bit of how Foxygen does that with the tempo on their tracks. And the other song that was remade, Tungs, probably my favourite song on this whole album, honestly. The original version of Tungs was a lot more garage rock or punk influenced. It was a lot more heavy. But for this version of Tungs, I really like the sort of tropical vibe that is given off. Not only that little bass chord progression, but also the lovely little guitar strums that are sort of reggae-ish. That go bing, 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 bing. And it's just the sort of track you want to sway your hips to. It's just that sort of fun. I also really like the title track, You Are Going to Hate This, which brings back the heavy rock vibe. What was I doing? Was I just Wow, what was I just doing just then? Which brings back the heavy rock vibe. And then the last track, Off Age, I mean, it feels a little bit out of place on this album, but I can kind of look past that because it's a really pretty track. There's the ukulele, the glockenspiel, oh yes, the glockenspiel. And then the lyrics seem to be reminiscing back on years of teenage youth. And perhaps as an ending track, I do really like it. Kind of settles things down after that burst of energy that You Were Going to Hate This provided. However, there are moments on this album where I feel things get a bit tedious, or maybe there are some build-ups which kind of don't go anywhere, or in the case of Haunted, it takes too long for things to build up. It's a bit slow and lethargic, and kind of empty as well. The volume's a lot quieter, and the singing's a lot softer. And while I like that on the track Off Age, I do feel Haunted is a little bit too blank for me. It takes a long time to get to the nice part of the song, which is really towards the back end of that track, where the cellos come in, and so does the bass, and so does the glockenspiel. Yes, the glorious glockenspiel. I also have a bit of a problem with the placing of Haunted on this album. It's in the middle of this album, and it's in the midst of all of the energy that goes on tracks like Afraid of the Dark, Puppy Knuckles, and You and Me, and I feel it kind of dips in energy a little bit. For me, it's kind of the equivalent of a car going on a nice road trip and then suddenly it hits a traffic jam for a couple of minutes. There's also the track Growing Up, which I like the lyrical content, I love the sourness of it. They have the very explicit, "we f***ed it up." And the way they just bluntly express that, it really hits hard. And I feel they tried to express the same sort of sourness in the instrumental, but personally I just don't find it that endearing. It starts off as your expected, the Frights song. It just kind of has this nice little surf rock vibe going on, and then suddenly it just, out of nowhere, seemingly, it just bursts into this explosive, distorted bass and burst of guitar where it's just going bum bum boom, and it just keeps rumbling as the vocals are being sung over it. And then this sort of carries on and repeats for the whole song. But my main problem with this is, well, firstly, it just doesn't sound nice, and secondly, it just becomes very tedious. It just carries on for the whole song. Dun 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 bum bum bum. I guess the overall feel of this album is that there's some nice surf rock vibes going on, some nice abrasive, punchy guitar riffs, some awesome instrumentals towards the beginning and the back end. However, I feel it kind of dips during the middle, as well as some of the tracks being just plain tedious.
And personally, I might even say that I preferred the self-titled album over this one.
But collectively, the album was very worth checking out, and it's a very promising LP from the Frights as well. Personally, I'm gonna give this album a 7 out of 10. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.